Welcome to the show. I am your host, Todd Dallas Lamb, and you're listening to On the Clock. On the Clock is a venture with the Strategos Podcast Network, where we feature an array of guests to dive into all things education. We hope you enjoy. Welcome to On the Clock with Todd Dallas Lamb, and we are so happy to have with us on the show today Clifford Jones from Fulton County Schools. Clifford, I believe you go by Cliff, is that right?
That's right, Todd. Thanks.
That's great. Great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us to talk about education. In my mind, the most important topic in America. And you are the Chief Academic Officer of Fulton County Schools, 93,000 students, which makes you one of America's largest districts in America. Cliff, tell me a little bit about Fulton. You're in the Atlanta area. I know there are a couple of different massive districts within that region. What makes you different from those, and how do you fit into the Atlanta public school atmosphere?
Sure. Well, the fifth largest district in Georgia, but we are the only non-contiguous largest district in the nation.
What does that mean?
So Atlanta is right in the middle of us.
Yep.
Right. So we have a North Fulton, we have a South Fulton, and Atlanta Public Schools is right in the middle with over 50,000 students in Atlanta by itself. So when you think about Fulton County Schools, we have 14 cities that are within our borders. That creates a very complex network of governance partners and partnerships. We've got 106 schools that include some charter schools. 43% Black students, 29% white, 15% Hispanic, 12% Asian, and a 41% free and reduced lunch population.
That's got to be complicated in just communicating to all the various families. I'm imagining you have well over 100 different languages that are spoken within that complex district. And I find that fascinating on so many levels, but I also, I'm interested to know how you have probably had to tackle the pandemic in some innovative ways, and how you've communicated virtually to all those different families of different ethnic backgrounds. Has that been, you obviously had that challenge before the pandemic. It had to be intensified since then.
Communication on a good day in a big district is difficult, both internally and externally. During a pandemic, when you can't reach out to your community in traditional ways, where you can't show up, where you can't lead with your feet and and hit the ground, has really proven to be difficult. But I will tell you, with any crisis, there's opportunities. And so opportunities not only now exist that we didn't utilize in terms of whether it be Zoom or other sort of virtual platforms. Our parents are now engaging with text with us in ways that we hadn't done. Social media has been a huge avenue to reaching out to our communities, both for the teachers and for the district. Now, of course, I don't have an Instagram account, but on the sixth floor where I am, I'm one of the few that hasn't taken that on. And that's been a great way, beyond Twitter, beyond LinkedIn, beyond some of the other traditional platforms, that we found a lot of kids and parents have been able to converse about different issues.
In the last 12 months, I mean, we've read about different districts trying different things, and there's been, the chasm of success rates there. Did Fulton County buy any new products to try to meet this situation, or just simply rely on what you had and adapt through things that were sort of free, as you say, like social media?
Yeah. So we had just gone through a transition to Blackboard right before this hit. And utilizing Blackboard for us has been now a learning curve that we're going deep with. But I will tell you, it's not about programs, in my opinion. It's about people. So we still utilized our people, our network, meeting with those key people in the communities to be able to leverage their voice. It became a more frequent meeting cycle. The pace picked up because the message had to be repeated again during this time of crisis. So we did use Blackboard, but I would say it's the pace and cadence that really picked up.
So on the communication side, how did how did things change, and what, I imagine like any black swan event, you guys adapted, found out that there were some things that weren't as effective as you thought they might be, and maybe changed. And I'm guessing, like any black swan event, you found some things that worked, and you may never change. What were some of those aspects?
Yeah, so we had our first broadcast of a board meeting on utilizing Microsoft Teams, and we didn't know what we were doing, right? And
Yes.
so we just knew that we had to get it out there that when we transitioned to remote, and that sort of pace and cadence sort of took us probably 3 or 4 months around how do we get our governance partners and that governance theme out into the public in a way that's accessible, that's interactive. How does public comment work, right? In that setting. I will tell you that now we're back in a setting where we have face to face, but we have more people logging in as a result of that time period because they now know where to go to get that information. And we're utilizing our Fulton County TV. We have a TV network that we stand up. We're offering literacy lessons in the morning and some other programming that is educational, but we're also offering updates on what's going on with the district. And it's a cable TV channel. And other ways, it's really about our use of email, use of networks in terms of our availability. How are we meeting with our public in virtual settings? So our superintendent has meetings with partners, PTOs, teachers, community members. Our meeting list and pace and frequency has really exploded during this time.
I've over the years heard a lot of districts tell me that they rely on email, but only to a point, and that cell phones are a key communicator in incredibly economically challenged areas. You have 42% free and reduced lunch, so I suppose you have some folks that qualify in that labeling. How do you communicate with folks?
Yeah.
What is the blend now? And I would imagine that you've learned more since the pandemic about communications than you thought you knew. And what was consistent with what you knew before, and what have you learned?
Let me take you through a scenario, and that is when we have multiple cases of COVID at a school, when we have to transition to remote. This scenario did not exist pre-COVID, is now one that we're pretty good at in the middle of it. And part of that scenario is a toolkit for principals, where you have internal email communication, a call out communication, a Twitter communication, all part of the same toolkit, a district letter, and a school-based letter. That on top of high risk, low risk letters, and that toolkit is something that we definitely had in terms of crisis before, but now is something that is really more robust to be able to. Number one, I mean, this is serious information, right? And so that we not only provide what the information is, but how they being the audience, whether it's internal or external, can seek more information from our health partners, right? And or more information from us as the educational professionals. If we're going to go to full remote for 3 days, how are you going to get your education? What's that going to look like? Right? And what's the recovery on the other side of it?
I'm fascinated. You guys have been open. Maryland, I'm here in Maryland, and as we tape this podcast, we are at the beginning of March, and I'm cognizant. We just started school back full time here in Maryland for most counties. I think it's most counties. It could be a few that have held out. You guys have been open for school since October. Is that correct?
That's right. So we started the year in remote in August, and then phased in 4 phases into full remote, and now all parents have an option.
And this is the really, if we were like on a serious, 60 Minutes, I would ask you the big question. The big question, Cliff, is what is this is fascinating to me. What is the number of parents that have opted to put their kids back in, and what is the percentage of students that are staying at home?
Yeah, so we've seen it vary. Right now it's about 50-50, but as the community spread rate goes up, we allow parents to petition to go to a different learning environment, right? So we're sensitive to that. And so we've seen 60-40 on both sides of it. We've seen 50-50, but it's usually about 50-50 for right now.
So, you know, project out, look forward to a year from now, if you had to guess. And by the way, Cliff, last year when I was doing some of these podcasts, I was wrong on like nearly every prediction. Like I thought that the kids would be in school by fall, and I'm just dead wrong. So you will not be held to task if you're wrong. But I've heard predictions going forward from some chief academic officers and then some former chief academic officers who are still paying attention, that think that the number of students that are going to stay home and want and demand virtual education could be as high as 25%. Does that jive with your thinking at this point?
I think that's a little high,
Yep.
But it's that 15% mark that we kind of are planning for. Every district that I'm aware of in the metro area is now going to offer a totally virtual school, right? They're going to offer some kind of hybrid learning, whether it be a remote class here or some kind of hybrid moving into the fall, along with a more robust face-to-face option.
Yep. And through the demographics of your district, which is frankly one of the more demographically interesting districts I think I've ever seen, 12% Asian Americans. Do you have any numbers on which parts of that pie are more likely to stay home versus those that are likely to come back to school? Or does it even matter?
When we talk about averages in Fulton County schools, below the averages, you really have some extremes, right? So, in our northern suburbs, those schools are typically 80% coming face-to-face and 20% staying remote.
Yep.
Now that varies by level. What we've noticed is a lot more high schoolers are not coming back face-to-face. I don't know if that's because the AP exams are now remote or what.
Right.
But in our southern in South Fulton, we do have some schools where it's 80% remote, right? But the law of averages doesn't show that when I say it's 50-50.
Yep.
Right.
No
But
doubt
also,
about it.
I would say that the people are really following the trends in their communities, right? So when I say we have 14 municipalities, they are all communicating their own case rate, their own spread rate, and so people are paying attention to that.
So again, getting back to my black swan scenario, what has surprised you in all of this?
Yeah. So when we first tilted to remote, right? We decided very specifically that our mission was going to stay the same. We were going to deliver high level education for all students. We had to change our methods overnight. And to do that, we really had to scale back, right? We had to scale back what we were trying to do so that we could try to get it right. And then we've scaled forward since about August. And what we've learned and what surprised me the most were some of the same things that sort of were our Achilles heel going into it. It seems like the pandemic, it has exacerbated the soft spots in the organization, right? And so things like grading for us, very fundamental grading and attendance, right? Those have been really areas of robust conversation that people have a lot of opinions about, and we've tried to react. We've tried to initially we said we held all grades constant. You couldn't go any farther down and do any worse. You could only get better. Back in August, then we started doing more robust grading, and we really limited it to only summatives. We didn't grade any formatives in the grade book. Now second semester, and we're back to our normal grading procedures with a lot of provisions. But the one thing that has changed and is going to stick is that we decided to be a no zero district. this was the time to change the fact that a behavior didn't equal an academic outcome in our district. And so we replaced zeros with incompletes. I've noticed that that conversation in and of itself and that change moving forward is really working to help students. It's a lot of work for teachers. I will admit that there's multiple opportunities, and there is a drop dead time where you gotta turn your stuff in. But that one change around grading has really sort of led us forward and been very student centered.
I have two boys. They're both they're so different that it made me want to have like 30 kids just to see what the range looked like. And one of them is just dying, not being in school. And the other one couldn't be more at ease with virtual learning and being on his own. And it makes me think, getting back to the idea of having 30 kids, I'll never do that, but you have 90,000 kids. And I would imagine that there's some of them that are thriving in this environment, some that are staying home are thriving in this environment, not being in a school around people, because that's a challenge to a lot of kids. Socialization is what we always thought was the great value of American education, in addition to just learning. But I also think that there's a lot of kids that are quite happy doing this from afar and have a few friends and don't need a billion friends and don't need to be in that socialization. And I also think that you might be finding that behavioral problems are just not even existent compared to the way they are in school. Because let's face it, I got pushed around in school, a million years ago. There's some kids that probably can learn better on their own. Are you guys? Is it too early to look at data on behavioral interactions and interventions that you used to deal with in person, and figuring out that there might be some kids that just can thrive from their living room in an education setting?
Well, first of all, it's never too early to look at data, right?
Yep.
So let's just put that on the table.
Sure.
We are utilizing our research partner at Georgia State University, and we started looking at some benchmarking, some longitudinal data. It's early, right? But that is really driving some of our resources and differentiated responses to where we feel like, and the data says that we need to really sort of address the learning impact of COVID. Now, there also is social emotional impact of COVID. You might hear the term, trauma-based supports, because certain of our students, what we found through our locate, assess, and connect protocol is that when you're not engaged, we've got to be able to figure out what those barriers are, right? And so we have to be able to identify the barrier so that we can address the barrier. And sometimes that means a hotspot. Sometimes that means looking at other wraparound supports from our partners like communities and schools. And sometimes that means looking at some behaviors of some of the siblings that you might be responsible for their learning while your parents at work. Some of the behaviors might be your peers, right? And some of the behaviors might be your own in terms of responsibility and really logging in and doing the things that you need to do to learn in this remote setting. So we've been looking at the academic data over time, the growth data, utilizing what we use already. So we have 4th through 8th grade data that we've been looking at to inform our practice moving forward. But we've also looked at behavior and most importantly, Todd, I would say engagement. Engagement, the yellow bus no longer is the lever, right, or access point to an American education. That is gone. Yep. Right? It is now the internet and an access point and a computer. And so how do we ensure engagement in a virtual setting has really sort of been a game changer for us.
Okay, so I'm obsessed with the busing system. How much of a challenge, maybe as an academic officer in Fulton County, you may not touch on the logistics of it, but how much of a, with 50-50 students, how are you picking kids up? How did you have to retweak just the sheer logistics of getting kids home, from home and to home every day when half of them are gone? That had to be an incredible effort to figure out and reroute the busing structure.
Well, we run a 2-tier bus route, right? So this is your academic officer describing bus routes. So
fair enough.
That, right? So we run a 2-tier bus route, but I will tell you that we found that our percentage of remote and our percentage of in-face learning, person to person, has allowed us to create social distancing norms and standards that our parents are comfortable with,
Yep.
right? So we're wearing masks, just so you know, right? We're offering hand sanitizer on the bus, right? We have seating charts so that we can do contact tracing if need be, right? And we actually are utilizing different bus schedules and stops during this time. But honestly, when our parents choose to go back face to face, they're choosing the whole experience. And that means lunch, that means transitions, that means buses, that means classroom, right? And they're choosing that knowing that we have modified social distancing, mask requirements, and as best we can, right? We're having all of the safety provisions that are out there that you would recognize.
So, last serious question of our time here, Cliff. What is cool about what you've done? What is it about this pandemic that you've done where you say we ain't going back? We like this.
I think it's the mindset,
Yep.
right? And I think it's the mindset of going from bricks to clicks, right? And so we understand that learning truly now is anytime, anywhere, right? And so how can we integrate that into policy? What does attendance policy look like post-COVID so that we don't have to worry about, an excused absence? Because really, all I need to know is that you're online, you're
Yep.
there. What does asynchronous look like in a post-COVID world, and how can we integrate that into our learning and teaching structures, right? Do we really need final exams, right? What does summative assessment look like in an authentic assessment environment based on a student-centered model? These are the questions that we had to address quickly. And now that I know that the conversation started, the conversations are getting so rich and just won't be the same.
I was just in at a conference, and if I had a nickel for every time I heard the words learning loss, I would be a rich man.
So let me push back on that.
Okay.
Right? Learning loss is an adult term. Learning impact, right? What did we lose? Well, we lost a lot if we compare going from point A to point B, right, in a normal time. It was not normal, right? We actually called our learning impact group, learning recovery, learning loss to start with. We had teachers and parents and kids all push back and say that makes us feel like we didn't do enough during the pandemic where we were giving our all, right? And so,
well, I mean, it's a funny thing. I think that for every step forward or step backwards, there's a step or two forward. It's funny that my kid is now doing every day, has been doing every day, what I've been doing for the last 10 years, which is getting on a call and communicating and learning from others, oftentimes remotely. And that's, that is the future of this world. And I guess it's possible to say that kids, while they're not hammering equations to quite the extent that they used to do, they're learning how to communicate in an incredibly digital way. And there's something to be said for that, isn't there?
Resiliency, grit. Yep. It's those social and emotional learnings that this generation of student has really been exposed to, that we need to be able to lift up, not as a term of loss, but as a term of celebration, that they've made it through this. And they're going to do extraordinary things because of it.
So we always like to touch base on popular culture just a little bit on this podcast. And we did a little bit of a investigation on you, Cliff. You are an acapella guy. Tell me more about that. And I've got a story for you when you're done.
Sure. I was exposed to acapella through my son. My son was part of a barbershop quartet. They competed at the high school that I was the principal at. So I got to follow the men's barbershop quartet around to different competitions. They finished second in state. And so for our for his spring break, I got to take him up to Buffalo, New York, upstate New York, right? And we went to a acapella competition. It was the only one during that time. That's the only reason I went to Buffalo, New York, during my spring break, and it snowed on us. But we got to hear 11 groups sing acapella. Now he doesn't sing anymore, but I still listen, and I've been on my little journey of acapella ever since. And it's just a great memory to have as a father, but also to remember what our students can do given the opportunity. It's amazing.
So, I mean, I have to tell you that my sons, when they were younger, when the movie first came out, gosh, help me out with the name of the movie. The acapella movie, Cliff.
This is the one with Anna Kent.
Pitch Perfect. Pitch Perfect. And I am like I was born a redneck from Northern California. Only, in the last 20 years, I've become the sophisticated statesman that you see before you today. But I cried like a baby watching those girls sing that song. I fell in love with that show. When my sons made fun of me for it. So there you go. It's funny how our kids turn us in different directions than we thought. It's one of the great values of having a child. I made fun of soccer forever, and now there's nothing I wouldn't do to watch my own son play soccer, and intend to be flying down to closer to you, North Carolina, to watch him in a tournament in just a few short weeks. So that's fantastic. And then one of my other vices is bad food. Barbecue is one of them. You're in Georgia. It's got to be some good places down there. What is your food vice?
Yeah, mine is nachos. So at the end of a stressful night, you take anything and put it on tortilla chips, right? Yep. Any meat, anything, right? If it's lettuce, that's a salad, right? If it's meat, that's an entree. So I put meat and cheese on chips and call it a night, and that's my bad food.
You're also in movies. You're a sci-fi guy, I'm told.
Yeah. So after the movie, when I watch with my wife, that's not a go. No go on sci-fi. Right?
Yeah.
That's not a couple's moment.
Nope.
But on my own, I love watching any kind of Star Trek, the new series that I love, and this is silly, but The Mandalorian.
Yep.
That's one of my favorites, and then
that's
also
got Baby Yoda, right? That's what all the fuss is about with the little tiny Yoda.
Yeah, and then all the Star Trek, Star Wars. Call it a day.
I love it. I cannot be on TV buzzing through channels. If Star Wars is on, I am locked in to that universe. It's fantastic. Well, Cliff, thank you so much for being on the show. You are now off the clock, and we thank you for being on the clock as long as you were. And we really hope and wish you the best as you go forward, as you close out this school year. I imagine you have a lot of work to do, getting ready for perhaps the summer work that you're going to do, and then getting ready for hopefully what is a normalized school year in the coming year.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of On the Clock. If you want to learn more about the show, please visit www.strategosgroup.com. Please consider subscribing on your podcast streaming platform so you don't miss out on our next episode. And until next time, I'm Todd Dallas Lamb, signing off.